Hey everybody, welcome to Friday's Illustration Masterclass with me, Kyle T. Webster. Thank you for joining me. Today we're going to talk about color. Now, I want to say right up front at the beginning of this show that I am no expert when it comes to color. In fact, I've always considered color to be probably the thing that I'm the worst at figuring out in my own illustration work. However, I see it as a bit of an advantage that I've always had this mentality about color, because what it has forced me to do is figure out a few tricks that I can use to ensure that I have good color harmony and good palettes in the work that I produce for clients and for myself and so on. In other words, this feeling I have that I just don't really get color that well, and I don't have the ability to just randomly pick nice colors that will look good together, has really in some ways made me try to figure out some workarounds that are very reliable and that can make me feel more at ease with color, knowing that I've got a method behind what I'm doing that is going to work for me. Okay, now I want to share some of these tricks with you on today's show. Okay, so let me just also say, if you're watching this on YouTube or if you're watching on Twitter, I am only going to be reading the comments in the chat at Behance, and that is be.net/live. That's where you can join the conversation and ask me questions and make suggestions along the way. Okay, so we're going to get right to it now. I'll say hi to some folks who've joined us over here at Behance. We have Godfred, nice to see you. Marcelina, nice to see you. Annika, Deanne, Jason, Victoria. Hey, Bruce is here. Cornell, Umacorn, and Laura. What's up, Voodoo Val? Nice to see you. Steve is here. Hello, and Jack. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. Zika and BrevityBot. Anyway, thank you for being here, and let's get started. Probably all seen this a million times, little color wheel. Now, we're going to come back to this, but I just wanted to be there for us to have as reference a little later. But to keep things simple, I wanted to start with the method I use most often to take away all of the stress I feel when I do this, when I open the color picker and I look at any one of these hues along the hue slider here, okay? And I have to just randomly pick something in here. Now, just for this one hue, okay, this sort of violet, right? There are millions of options. Then I move it a little further down here towards the blue, millions of options. Millions of options. This is just way too much pressure to try and randomly assign colors to my illustration by opening the color picker and just coming in here and grabbing something. Well, for a person like myself, who I don't feel like I have a good eye for color intuitively, this is a stressful situation. I don't want to deal with that. And so I'm going to show you the method I use to keep things very simple. And it may surprise you to know that this method comes from how I would use traditional paint. Once you see how I do it, I think you're going to like it, and I really think you should try it out for yourself. I will then show you a couple of tricks you can use, kind of starting with this method, that will give you some other options for creating a harmonious palette for your work. All right, so close this little baby right here. You'll notice I do have my colors available to me in the top right corner of the screen right now here in Photoshop. And I have opted to use the color wheel. Just so you know, there are options here that you can choose from. The hue cube is probably the one everyone's most familiar with. There's a brightness cube, a color wheel, and there's some other options here as well. Lots of people love the HSB sliders. Those look like this. And they allow you to adjust the hue up here, the saturation of that hue here, and the brightness or value of that hue here. Okay, so that's another way you can play with color. A lot of painters like that, because if they're trying to paint something and they want to retain the same brightness, and then just do a slight shift in the hue, either warmer or cooler, for example. This is a good way for them to do that. Alrighty? But I'm going to go back to the old color wheel here. And I want to show you this simple trick. Now, here's what I like to do. You all have heard of the primary colors, okay? And there's lots to talk about with primaries. Are the primaries blue, yellow, and red? Yes and no. You know, primaries are simply colors that when you mix them together, you will not be able to make one of those three colors out of those mixes. Okay, but most commonly we think of them as being yellow, red, and blue. Now, if you're familiar with how on-screen color works, right, then you're dealing with RGB, red, green, and blue. But for printing, we think about red and blue and yellow. Or for process printing, we think of cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, CMYK. But what I like to do here in Photoshop is I like to simply take three primaries, any kind of a red, any kind of a yellow, and any kind of a blue or sort of greenish blue. And I like to start with those three colors and then simply mix up a few from those so that I know that every single color that I create going forward will have been created using those three original colors. And therefore, we should wind up with a palette that is pretty harmonious. I know it sounds really simple, but a lot of people don't do this. So why don't we take a look at how I do it. First, I want to mention that the brush you use matters. You need to use a brush for this exercise that will change its opacity based on pen pressure. Okay, so the little stylus that you're using, you ought to be able to use light pressure for less opacity and heavier pressure for more opacity. And the brush that I use most commonly for this is in the paint box in the Mega Pack, and it is called Creamy. Here it is, Kyle's Paint Box Creamy, and that is in the Mega Pack. There are other brushes you could use for this. You don't have to use this brush. I just like this one. In fact, if you want to keep things really simple, you could just use the hard round brush and make sure that your opacity is set to be controlled by pen pressure, and you can still get similar results, okay? All right, but for now I'm going to use the Creamy brush because I like it. And we're going to start with the most basic exercise, which is I'm going to put my, here in the triangle here where I'm controlling the brightness and saturation of the color, I'm going to make it pretty saturated here, okay? And I'm going to push it a little bit more towards the greens, all right, over here on the hue wheel. And I'm just going to put some color down. Alrighty, now that'll be my blue, okay? I'm going to slide around here to a yellow, okay? And I'm going to make that slightly brighter, And you don't have to do this. You could have used the same value. I will show you in the end, it doesn't matter. Okay, this is just for the sake of demonstrating how you can create any kind of palette that works together. Okay, and I'll slide this on over here now, more towards the reds. And this color is going to be nice and bright. And there we go, simple as that. Now, before I go any farther, I want to mention something very important about working with colors on a screen versus working with colors in print. Every document I create in Photoshop, I work in RGB. I never work in CMYK mode, right? You've got your mode for your colors here, RGB, CMYK, right? I always stick with RGB. And the way I know that colors I'm selecting for my illustrations are color safe or print safe, which means that when I go to print the artwork, it's going to look the same in print as it does on screen. The way I know that the colors are safe is I watch out for this little warning that Photoshop will give you when you choose a color that is not print safe. And I'll show you one right here. See that? I push the saturation really intense over here and bright for this red pink color. And when I did so, this little warning showed up right here, okay? a little warning sign with a triangle and an exclamation point, along with a box next to it that has that same color shown in it. And if I just tap on that box, the warning goes away, and you'll notice that the color has changed slightly. And what Photoshop has done here is it has provided me with the color that is the closest in hue, saturation, and value or brightness to what I originally wanted, but that is also color safe. So this is a really handy thing. So you just have to watch out for that, and if you see that little warning, you just tap on that box and you know that you're going to get a color that'll print just fine and look the same as it does in your document. All right, now, this brush that I have, this creamy brush, if I use very light pressure, you'll see that I get a very light mark, okay? Medium pressure, a little stronger, and then on to full brightness. So it does respond to the pressure I use with regards to the opacity. So I put down these three colors. The next thing that I do is I use a black, but the black I use is never solid black. I'll take my blue color, all right, and by the way I'm sampling color from my document is I am temporarily holding down the Option key on the keyboard. Option on a Mac, Alt on a PC. So I'm holding that down to sample that blue. I come back over to my color wheel, and I take the blue and I make it very saturated, and I make it very, very dark. Alrighty, something like this. And I just put that down here, and that will be the black that I use later. All right. I make a new layer, and I start doing this. I will sample the red, use light pressure, and paint over the yellow, sample that color, and then I'll put it over here. Okay. Then I'll sample the red again, use light pressure over the blue, sample that new color, put it over here. Then I will sample the blue, use light pressure, paint it over the yellow, put that over here. Now what do we have? We have our secondary colors, the orange, the purple, and the green. One thing you might notice right off the bat is that all three of these colors are going to be less saturated than the original three primaries. And that is because we're using this method where we use light pressure, so the opacity of the original color being mixed with the secondary color is not so great. And this just by virtue of the method that we're using is going to desaturate the color slightly. Okay, and that is why I do this on a separate layer, because the next thing I do is I simply pull up Command U, my hue saturation sliders. And since this is all on a separate layer, I can simply take the saturation and bump it up by a factor of like 9 or 10, somewhere in that vicinity. Maybe even just, 5 or 6 is going to be fine. Okay, and I say okay. And now I have my secondary colors. Now to check them, right, I can just do this. I'm holding down the Option key, right? I can check this color, and every time I tap on a color, I just glance over here and make sure I'm not getting a warning, okay? Tap, 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 all good. And then I can proceed to repeat this process by adding a new layer and just grabbing any one of these secondary colors and quote unquote mixing it with another secondary color to create more neutral colors. Okay? Like so. Very nice. And I can then simply get rid of whatever I don't need from these other layers. And if I want to, then I can grab all three of these layers and merge them together. Command E. And that is the beginning of my palette. Okay? Now, all I have to do going forward is I can make lighter or darker versions of these colors. I can make as many other neutrals as I want simply by mixing any of these colors together with one another and just seeing what I get. But all I know is that from this point forward, I am in a very safe zone for mixing color and winding up with color that will work in my illustration because everything is derived from these three primaries, okay? For example, I want to darken up the red. I simply grab this black and I just pull it over here, okay? And there's my darker color. Get that blue, there's my darker color. This will probably create kind of a nice green. Yeah, very nice. Okay, here, and so on and so forth, okay? And this way I'm just building a little palette of lovely colors that will all play nicely together. Okay. And I can look and see what I've got, and I can start grabbing things like this yellow and mixing it with this brown, seeing what I get, right? Grabbing this blue, mixing it with this purple, get like a really rich purpley blue, okay? Very nice. Now, what do you do for the lighter colors? Well, I'm actually working on, if you notice, see this? I'm working on a gray, very light gray background right now. And I like to do that because I like to be able to grab either my blue, yellow, or red from the beginning, and then use a very, very light version of that as my white. So, for example, with yellow, I just come all the way up here, almost to perfect white, put that color down. Now it's got just a tiny bit of a tint to it, all right? And that for me is interesting. And so I can grab that color, come over here, lighten that yellow a little bit, grab it again. There's my pink. That's a pretty color, I like that. Okay, and you see how this works, right? And you just go through this process. You can go and take this as far as you want. This could be, you know, as much of a, you could just carry this out for days and continue to mix colors together. But what I like to do then at some point is just kind of look at what I've got, right? And say, okay, now what is this? Let's see, that's this one. Okay, I like this one. This one might be nice to use with that. Maybe something a bit more saturated. There's our original secondary color right there. And maybe something like that. Those all look nice together, don't they? Right? And I didn't have to do anything special to make that happen. It's just how things worked out. And I'll show you an important step after this. First, I'm just going to grab a few of these and see how they look together. Okay? Just see how we're doing with these colors. I think I want a lighter blue in there. Yeah, I like that. Okay, we're going to use our dark blue as well. And maybe this pink will play nicely there. And remember, I really don't know what I'm doing. This is just me trying out a few things, and I can always come back and change my mind. As the great Christoph Niemann has said time and time again, the wonderful thing about digital art is it takes the analog process and it makes it infinitely more flexible and endlessly reversible. Such a good sentence. He is an eloquent man. All right, so we have some colors here, and you might notice that I'm squinting at them. And the reason I squint at my colors is I like to see the value range that I have. Might throw this little baby in there too. I like to look at the value range, and I'm feeling like I've got some darks, I've got some mids, got some lights, got some cools, I've got some warms. And, you know, this guy, let's see how he looks next to this. Let's see how he fits into the picture. I'm not sure. All right, here's a trick I want to show you now. So I've got these colors. I'm looking at them, and they look pretty nice together. And here's what I'm going to do. I am going to make a selection here with my rectangular marquee around this little palette, okay? And I'll make a new layer. And I'm just going to fill this with black, okay? So I filled it with black. And then I'm going to set the layer mode to hue or color, okay? They're not exactly the same, but they're pretty darn close. So I guess I'll just use color for now. And what this does is it shows me in black and white, or in grayscale rather, what kind of a range of colors I'm dealing with. And I can get rid of this background here, this gray background, if I want to just look at it on the clear white background and see how we're doing. So we have we have two very light colors. We have some like 30%, 40% grays here, maybe here's about like a 25%. These are getting into the middle, right? And then we have some darks that are all pretty dark. They're all pretty close in value to one another. What I feel like I'm missing in this palette is something that's dark, but more at like a 60% gray. And since these are all so close to one another, so I can hide that. And I can look and I can say, all right, so maybe these two, if I squint and look at them, you know, they're just a little too similar. We can get rid of that guy maybe. You could also leave it and then just use a different color that's, you know. So let's see how dark this one is. It's probably still a little dark. And I have to decide, do I want to go warmer or cooler? It doesn't really matter, but you know, maybe the one color I want to use that's from my original primaries is this cat right here, this blue. All right, we turn this back on and we can look and say, oh yeah, that kind of gets me close to what I want value-wise. It's very similar to this, which makes me think this is actually darker than I realized. Excuse me. So I can take this color and I can darken it just a hair. And come back over here and just do that. And now these wind up looking really similar. So I could replace that with maybe something like this green. Let's see how that looks up there. Yeah, that might work. I don't know, let's see how it feels. And then I can ask if I have enough neutrals in there. Maybe not, maybe this gray is a better choice. Because even this gray has a touch of color to it, right? It's not devoid of color. So that might be nice. All right, so let's just say that I settle on something like this, okay? That's maybe where I want to be. And I might like one more warm here to complement that brown and just kind of pair it up with that. Or maybe this one might be a nice choice. That feels kind of good. Okay, now why don't we grab all these? Command J, just copying those onto their own layer, okay? And that can be sort of the starting point for me for a little composition where I can play around with some color and see what I can do. And before I do that though, I just want to show you another trick. Check this out. I'm going to duplicate this, okay, onto its own layer. So I'm holding down I hit V for the move tool, then Option Shift, drag. Okay, so I've got a few versions of my little palette here. And I'm going to start with this one. This is the original. Now with the second one, Command U, this pulls up again our hue saturation sliders. Check out how fun this is. You create your original palette, okay? And then watch this. You just take the hue slider and move it over a little bit. Look at this. Just move it by a factor of -26. And voila! Brand new palette, brand spanking new palette to play with. All the colors will remain harmonious with one another because they are all shifting at the same rate in one direction or another, so those relationships remain connected, right? And let's do it again. Here's that third one. Command U, I'll just click it Push it the other way. Go this way. Okay, I'll do a larger factor. Let's go 50 points that way. Or maybe we, oh, I'm sorry, I'm doing the, I'm doing the wrong one. Yikes, I kept expecting there to be a change and there wasn't. There we go. So we'll do this. We'll go this way. You can go crazy with it. Look at this. That's a kind of an interesting palette, isn't it? That's kind of interesting. Could go that way. Right? Say okay. Now, some of these look like they might be dangerous. This color, for example, I wonder if that's color safe. Let's check it out. No, it's not. It's not. What do I do? What do I do? Don't worry. I'll keep my palette just as it was. Go back to my hue saturation sliders and just reduce the saturation by a factor of like 25 or so. Okay. Come back. Check this again. Ah, safe, 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 safe. See that? Now check it out. We have 3 completely different but lovely palettes to think about for our design, for our illustration, for whatever. And we're in really good shape. Now, and I can just push it even darker, and I can then, it's dark that I have, or rather this really is kind of the coolest dark. I can go that way. Push that over there, right? Come over here or here. Push that over there. If you want to do that, you don't have to. But it's fun, you know, and like for even lighter, you can't even tell the difference, can you? There we go. Grab this guy and go even lighter. And you can use them to mix lighter colors again. Remember, so I'm just gonna grab these, merge them together. Grab this. And we're gonna do the same over here. All right, and you can just fill this out if you wanna have an even 16 colors or whatever. Not that you need that many. But why don't we play around with this a little bit? All right, so let's do this. All right, hopefully we are back. Having some connection issues today. I'll just double check the connection here for a second. There, now it says excellent. Okay, that's what we want, isn't it? Back to what I was gonna say, which is we're gonna try a little composition here using some of these colors. So we could just pick one of these. I think this one's really interesting, this one in the middle. Frankly, I like all of them, but just because it's a little more funky, maybe not something I would have come up with on my own right off the bat. So let's do this. Make myself I'll make a little bigger area to play with here, like this. Here's my little painting area. And let's do this. Let's just grab this color and I'll paint in like a sort of a sky. Yeah, you can laugh at the sound of my stylus as it's painting because I use those felt nibs from my Wacom, which I just love them, but they really do make a racket. I'm so used to it now that it's just one of those things. Actually, I'm gonna grab this guy, do this. Look how nice that already looks. These colors they all just look good together, you know? Grab this guy. We do like a fat sort of tree here in the foreground. I'm just using this brush, it's so big. You're not gonna get anything fancy here shape-wise, but who cares? We're just keeping it simple, just as a demo, so you can see how this works, okay? Alrighty, and we'll grab, let's see, like this color here. Or no, I wanna go with this guy. Do some other sort of foliage-y sort of bits and pieces here in the foreground. Okay. Bit more stuff here. Grab this. Come back. Okay. Have a little clearing here for us to enter, and then we're going to have a little, there's a little path of some kind. Path through the grass or whatever. I'll put that a little higher up on the picture plane. And we'll grab this color here as well and throw in some more stuff. And we'll just say, here is a house of some kind. With a roof that is going to be this color. I like that color. Do that. Beep. Let me go a little lighter there at the top. See that? Let me just throw that little door there, whatever. Actually, I like that color for sort of the dark side of the house. Maybe we throw some more foliage in front of it, whatever. You want to make a darker color with this, you just do this. Whoops, I gotta grab that. Grab this, grab that. Just going fast here, just to demo what could be done. And then here I want some darker shapes, more contrast. Throw that in there. And then we can use maybe this color along the path. And maybe someone standing here. Right? The door looks too small. Make it the right size. All right, you get the idea. Right? Look how easy that is. Now, I just look at this, it's not that great, whatever. Who cares? The point is, the colors all play nicely together. We never got into our crazy colors either. We can use those for accents. So like, bam, you want some light to hit the house there or whatever? You want something to stand out? There's your little color right there. I could use that same color to maybe tint something if I want here or there. You know, and we also have the option of using this color here, maybe for something in the distance here, a little tree. And that reads pretty well. I can always darken the top of that there. Maybe he's got some shadows falling on it. Right? You want to go a little darker here, you can always grab this and you can take your color here and you can just do that. It's the same mixing technique, right? And then I can have a bit more contrast against that side of the tree if I want. We haven't even used our lightest color, but maybe that's what we use up there, right? I don't know. So you just go back and forth until you find something that works. And everything you do, you know you're in safe territory because you mixed all those colors to begin with from the same little bunch, right? So this is a pretty fun thing. Maybe you want to warm up some part of the sky for some reason. I can just do that. These light pressure. Come over here. Color over that light, right? And everything I do there is going to be fine because I know where those colors came from. They all started with the same primaries. So maybe that's what I do. I warm everything up over there. Who knows? All right, so what do you think about this method? What do you think about this way of working? Is this something you might want to try yourselves? You know, what do you think? Think this might be something you need in your life? I don't know. I certainly think it's useful. And it has helped me many times to figure my way out of a mess where I just cannot get the colors to work, right? So I just keep it simple from the get-go, and then it works, you know? Okay, if you want to see how these things read, what you do is you make a little box behind them, and you fill it with white, and then it's kind of like a little frame, and then you can see, okay, how's that look? Yeah, these colors look fine together. So let's see here. Zika, you're unable to download the brushes? Can somebody help Zika with that? You just log in with your credentials on the Adobe Brushes download page, and should work fine. You're logged into your account, but it keeps asking me to sign in. Oh, okay, yeah, try another browser. That makes sense. Thanks, Bruce. Glad you like that brush. Victoria, how did you mix them? If you watch the replay of this stream, you'll find the technique is very simple. I use a brush that responds to pen pressure with opacity, so that if I'm using more pressure, I get lighter opacity, and I simply paint that over another color and then use the color I just created. So like, for example, if I want to mix this color with this color, I sample this color using the eyedropper, and then I paint very gently over this color, and I use the eyedropper again, and it yields that color. That's the technique. But yeah, so this is fun, isn't it? To take your original mix, or whatever group of colors you've settled on, use your hue saturation sliders to push the hue and saturation of that mix in different directions, and then see what kind of palettes you can make from there, right? Now, this little demo, this little painting we just created, I want to try something here, just for kicks. Going to expand the size of my canvas here. And I'm just going to grab all this and merge it together. And let's take this, slide it over this way, and we'll make a copy of it. And with that copy, like, we could now able to make something else that's kind of interesting and fun to look at. Like, that's kind of interesting. You know? Would I ever in a million years have really come up with a color? Something like that. It's kind of nice. You can reduce the saturation. You know? But that's kind of interesting. Doesn't read quite as well as that one, I don't think. And that one's still probably the most. What about something less painterly? you know, or lasso tool. So this time maybe I'll use our original mix of colors over here. Okay, why don't we do that? All right, so I'll fill it with a color. Just use this. And I'm going to lock the layer transparency so that any selection I make outside of that is still going to be fine. And then let's have some fun here. We'll actually like this color. Okay. And let's grab something like this. And then maybe this color. Actually, I like this. And we can make a nice sort of a pattern here. And see, everything just kind of feels okay. It just sort of works. You're in a safe color mixing space, as it were. You know what I mean? And I know this is not the most efficient way to go about doing what I'm doing, but that's okay. That lightest value, that lightest color we have there. And there you go. So remember that trick now. We can just put a white border behind it. See how that reads. Doubt that area, but again, these stand by my belief that the answer is no. I don't think I would be able. I wouldn't. You know, now everyone's different. You know, maybe you're the kind of person who just looks at the color wheel and goes, "Oh, that'll work. That's harmonious. No problem." I would never profess to be that person. I just am not that person. And that's okay, because this little trick works for me. This way of mixing color and then coming up with a palette really works for me. and it helps me to get to where I need to be. Cool. You really want to paint now, Victoria says. All right, great, awesome. You too, Voodoo. Yeah. Val's the best. Hope you all watch Val's shows. Never thought of using the lasso for drawing and painting. Diseñador Gráfico, I will tell you that there is a, please go to YouTube or on Behance and search for my demonstration. If you go to my, it's either on my personal channel on YouTube, Kyle T. Webster, there's a demo I have that's about 4 minutes long. It's a time lapse of an entire painting done with only the lasso tool and color fills. And you can see how that technique can actually be very marketable and very useful for illustration. I also did a masterclass on it maybe about a month and a half ago. You can find that. It's obviously much longer. It's about an hour long. So if that technique interests you, then that's something you can check out. So we have a few minutes left, and I want to show you a couple of more tricks that you can try. Okay, but I hope all of this has made sense so far, and I think this is a simple, easy way to go about getting things to work. But why don't we just try just one more thing here? So another thing you can do is start with, check this out. I'm going to start with secondary colors, okay, so to speak, but they're going to be my primaries. So I'm going to start with like an orange, okay, and a nice sort of a violet and a green. Okay, now make my new layer as before. Grab the green, get that color, and get that color. And now I have some new colors to play with. Primary, and mix it with that. Let's see what I get. It's very similar to that. But then, same as before, make my black something that's in that purple range. Whoops, I forgot to paint that down, so I'll just do that here. Get a little more saturated, brighter than that. There we go. Okay. And I start to build a little palette around this. Grab my orange, make that my white. Can even go a little lighter than that. Just use a bit more pressure. Get that color. Okay. And then if I want, I can just come over here and grab all these variants of my colors. And go from those three original colors to building a palette like this. And it all started with my secondary colors, right? I haven't even really tried to build any neutrals here. And you can build your neutrals by mixing either three colors together or by mixing your secondary colors together. Usually you can get some decent neutrals, or you know, just you can always add the darker color or the lighter color and desaturate the color and then mix it. So for example, I could take this darker color, put it over the lighter color here, grab that, paint it over here. That's a nice brown neutral. But I can then take my purple, right? So that's one of my secondary colors, and mix it. And if I want to dull that down, I can grab its counterpart, the green, and make that color. Can warm it up a little bit, get another nice brown right there. Make all that darker. Okay, and so on. Anywho, there is another nice way to build out a little palette. And I know I didn't get all the way through it. But I know that now too, you understand how this gets done. So you could definitely do it on your own. I could grab this, Command J, put it on its own layer. I could even skew it. And as before, I could take it and use the hue saturation sliders to fiddle around and get completely different kind of palette from it, right? See what we're gonna get with that. There's a lot more we could do with values and everything else and making more colors, but here's what I wanted to show you. So let's say we like this, you know, take it over here. Here's something cool you can do. So here's my original. Actually, I'll make a couple copies of this so we can do it twice. Now, let us take a color. Any color will do, but you want it to be saturated, okay? Pretty heavily saturated. So like here's like a bright orangey red. Okay, I'm gonna make a new layer. And this is where we play with layer blending modes. So I'm gonna set that layer blending mode to overlay, okay? And just dump it right on top and then knock the opacity back to like 50%. Now what this does is it just tints all these colors towards that overlay color, okay? And then you have a completely different palette that is unified in a different way. It's unified with that kind of tint, okay? Another thing you can do is you can set that mode to multiply. And then you can grab, whoops, wrong layer, sorry about that, new layer. You can grab those colors and set them off to the side if you like as a completely separate palette. Again, tinted, but in a different way, right? Everything gets darker because we're setting that to multiply. Now, if I come back and change that quickly, so we'll go to like a color like this, right? Or we'll do something further away from our original batch. Then you see what happens. You wind up with a completely different set of colors as well. And what some people like to do, and I've only got a couple of seconds left to do this, is this. Make yourself a few light colors, okay? So I'm gonna do this really, really faint, really light. Not faint, but just these are gonna be some pretty light, bright colors, okay? And I'll do one more towards the pinkish kind of a side here. All right, start with these colors. Make yourself a new layer and set it to multiply. And then do this. Take your color, paint it over whatever you've got, and then take those colors and make those part of your mix. Very fun. Guys, I could talk about this all day. Hope you enjoyed it. Everybody take care of yourselves, take care of each other. Please remember to be kind. Have a great weekend. And I'm gonna say, ciao for now.